My husband left me during chemotherapy. Now he wants me back because his new wife cheated on him. I'm a 34-year-old woman, and if someone had told me a few years ago that the man I trusted most would abandon me during the darkest period of my life, I would have laughed in their face. Back then, Daniel wasn't just my husband. He was my best friend, my safe place, my family. We had been married for 8 years, and though we weren't perfect, I thought we were solid. But everything fell apart the moment I got diagnosed with breast cancer. When the doctor uttered the words chemotherapy, my entire world blurred. I didn't even hear the rest of the sentence because all I could think about was survival. My hands shook, my stomach flipped, and I remember turning to Daniel, searching for his strength. At first, he held me tight, whispered that we'd get through it together. For a few weeks, he was supportive, driving me to appointments, picking up prescriptions, holding my hand while I cried in the shower as clumps of hair fell down the drain. But then, little by little, something shifted. He started staying later at work. He made excuses about being too tired to talk. When I asked him if he was scared, he said, "Of course I am, but you need to focus on yourself." It sounded reasonable, but the tone, it felt like distance. The day he left me is burned into my memory like a scar. I was lying on the couch, weak from a chemo session, when he came home with a bag already packed. He didn't sit next to me, didn't touch me. He just said, "I can't do this anymore. I didn't sign up for this kind of life." My ears rang so loud I thought I would pass out. He didn't even wait for me to respond. He left the key on the counter and walked out. I spent the next nights crying so hard I thought I would choke on my own sobs. Not only was I fighting for my life, but the man I loved had decided I wasn't worth the fight. Friends tried to comfort me, telling me it was stress, that he might come back. But deep down, I knew he had chosen to save himself instead of standing beside me. And as if to confirm my worst fears, 2 weeks later I found out he had moved in with another woman. A healthy, younger woman. That's when humiliation really hit me. Not only had he left me while I was bald, nauseous, and terrified, I now had to watch him play house with someone else, as if I were already dead. I remember the first time I saw him again after he left. I was sitting in the waiting room at the oncology department, pale, weak, wearing a scarf over my bald head, when Daniel walked in with her. Her name was Emily. I didn't know much about her, but she was everything I wasn't at that moment: vibrant, smiling, hair perfectly styled, skin glowing. She clung to his arm like she was proud to be next to him. And when his eyes met mine, he froze for half a second before pretending not to know me. That was the day something in me broke. Not because I still loved him, I did, but love doesn't survive betrayal like that. It broke because I realized he was ashamed of me. The man who once kissed every inch of my scarred body now acted like I didn't exist. The humiliation spread quickly. Our mutual friends started whispering, asking how I could let him slip away, as if cancer had made me a bad wife. My own sister told me, "At least he's honest about what he wants. Maybe you should just let him go." Let him go? He had already left me on the battlefield while I was fighting for my life. Chemo made me sick, but the loneliness was worse. I would lie awake at night, my body aching, the taste of metal in my mouth, wondering if I had ever truly known him at all. Every beep of my phone terrified me. It could be another bill, another test result, another pity text. But Daniel? He never called. Not once. Until one evening, 3 months after he walked out, my phone lit up with his name. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. His voice was calm, casual, as if we had just fought over dishes. "How are you holding up?" I wanted to scream. How was I holding up? I was bald, poisoned by chemicals, abandoned like trash, and he had the audacity to ask me that as if it were small talk. I hung up without answering. But he didn't stop. The next week, he called again. This time he told me he missed me. That Emily wasn't what he thought she'd be. That she didn't understand him the way I did. I laughed so hard I nearly threw up. He wanted sympathy, from me, the wife he left to rot while he played house with his mistress. I told him never to call again. But he kept showing up. Once, he came to my door with flowers. My neighbor saw and later asked me if I was taking him back. I wanted to disappear. It wasn't enough that he destroyed me, now he wanted me to save him from his own mess. And that's when I realized, Daniel didn't regret leaving me. He regretted that his new life wasn't as shiny as he imagined. I wasn't his choice, I was his backup plan. I didn't think things could get more humiliating after seeing him parade around with Emily, but I was wrong. A few weeks later, one of my friends sent me a screenshot of Daniel and Emily's engagement announcement on Facebook. Engagement. He hadn't even divorced me properly before proposing to her. My stomach twisted so violently I had to run to the bathroom, retching until my throat burned. He hadn't just replaced me, he was trying to erase me entirely. The news spread like wildfire through our circle. Suddenly, I was no longer the woman battling cancer. I was the ex-wife who had been too much to handle. People I thought were my friends started attending their engagement parties, posting pictures, tagging Daniel, writing things like, "So happy you found your true love." Every photo was like another knife in my chest. Meanwhile, I was fighting for my life alone. Chemo drained me to the point where walking to the kitchen felt like climbing a mountain. My body shrank, my cheeks hollowed, but inside, anger began to grow. Every time I saw them smiling on social media, every time someone avoided mentioning his name around me, I felt that anger solidify. It became fuel. I told myself, I will survive, not for him, but despite him. Months passed. My treatments continued. I lost count of the times I broke down in the shower, crying silently so no one would hear. But I also found strength I never knew I had. I forced myself to cook, to clean, to write in a journal. I made it my mission to show myself that I could exist without him, even when I felt like a shadow of my former self. Then came the wedding. I wasn't invited, obviously, but the photos were shoved in my face anyway. Emily in a white dress, Daniel smiling like a man who had conquered the world. I studied his smile for a long time. It wasn't the smile he used to give me when he looked at me like I was the only woman in the room. This one looked strained, performative, almost desperate. For the first time, I thought, maybe he's not as happy as he wants everyone to believe. But life didn't allow me much time to speculate. I was still sick. I was still fighting. Some nights I wondered if I would even live long enough to see him regret what he had done. And then, just when I had started to stitch myself together again, he reappeared. It was almost a year after he left. I had finished my last round of chemo and was finally beginning to feel a tiny spark of hope. My hair was growing back in soft patches. I was tired, yes, but also proud. I had survived. That's when Daniel showed up at my door, uninvited, with tears in his eyes. I nearly slammed the door in his face, but something in his expression stopped me. He looked broken, desperate. I crossed my arms, blocking the entrance, and demanded to know what he wanted. "She cheated on me," he blurted out. His voice cracked, and for a second, he looked like the man I once loved, the man who used to hold me during thunderstorms. "Emily, she's been seeing someone else." I didn't know where else to go. I felt my chest tighten, but not out of sympathy. Out of rage. He had abandoned me at my lowest, and now that he was at his, he thought I would be his safe haven. He wanted me to comfort him, to fix him, after leaving me to rot alone. I told him he had no right to be there, no right to ask me for anything. He begged, literally dropping to his knees on my doorstep. He said I was the only person who ever truly loved him. That he realized his mistake. That he wanted me back. I stared at him, this man who once meant everything to me, and all I could see was a coward. A coward who ran when things got hard and only came crawling back when his shiny new life collapsed. That night, for the first time, I realized I had all the power. He needed me. And I no longer needed him. I wish I could say I slammed the door in his face that night and never looked back, but life isn't that clean. When someone has been part of your world for so long, cutting them out completely isn't as easy as it sounds. I closed the door on him, yes, but the moment I locked it and leaned against the wood, my hands were shaking. My stomach churned with anger, but under that anger was something far worse, temptation. Because the truth was, despite everything, a part of me still remembered who he used to be. The man who used to make late-night pancakes with me, who rubbed my back when I was sick even before cancer, who once swore in front of all our friends that he would never leave me no matter what. That man was long gone, but my heart, it still carried fragments of him. And he knew it. That's why he came back. The following week, he didn't stop trying. He called, he texted, he even showed up outside the hospital after one of my follow-up appointments. He had this way of making his misery sound like redemption. I made a mistake, he'd say, but I've learned my lesson. You're stronger than anyone I know, and I see that now. He spoke as if his pain from being cheated on somehow equaled my pain of being abandoned during cancer. The arrogance of that made me sick. At first, I ignored him. I told myself, don't answer, don't let him back in. But then one night, I saw his car parked outside my apartment. He sat there for hours. I watched from behind my curtains as he just stayed. My phone buzzed every 15 minutes with messages like, please talk to me, and I just want to see you smile again. Something inside me cracked. Against my better judgment, I went downstairs and knocked on his car window. He jumped like he'd been caught, rolled it down, and his eyes filled with tears instantly. I hated him for it. Because he knew that I had always been weak against his tears. We talked that night. Or rather, he talked and I listened. He told me Emily had humiliated him, that she cheated openly, that he was the laughingstock of his colleagues because everyone knew except him. He said being with her had made him realize what he lost with me, that I was the only one who ever stood by him. He begged me to let him prove himself again. And for a moment, a tiny, shameful moment, I almost believed him. But then I remembered lying in that hospital bed, vomiting into a plastic basin, staring at the empty chair where he should have been sitting. I remembered clutching a scarf around my bald head because he couldn't stand to look at me anymore. I remembered every single night I cried myself to sleep because he had chosen someone else over me. I told him, point blank, you left me when I was dying. You don't get to come back now that you're the one who feels broken. His face twisted, half shame and half anger. He said, I was scared. I didn't know how to handle it. As if fear excused cowardice. I told him everyone is scared when the person they love is sick, but not everyone runs. That night ended with him storming off, slamming his car door so hard the sound echoed through the parking lot. I thought it was over. I thought maybe he'd finally get the message. But I underestimated just how desperate he was. Because over the next month, Daniel turned my life into a battlefield. He started contacting my family, telling them how much he regretted everything. He showed up at my sister's house, begging her to convince me to give him another chance. He even messaged some of my friends, painting himself as a man who had made one mistake but was trying to redeem himself. The worst part? Some of them believed him. My own sister called me and said, maybe you should at least consider forgiving him. People change. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to scream that this wasn't just some fight about dishes or finances. He left me while I was sick. He left me to die. How was that something you just forgive? But the more he pushed, the more a dangerous thought crept into my mind. What if he never stopped? What if he was so desperate to rewrite history that he would keep hounding me until I gave in, or until I completely broke down? And that was when the fear started. Because Daniel wasn't just begging anymore. He was trying to invade my life again, piece by piece, and I had no idea how far he would go. The real nightmare didn't begin when he left me for Emily, it began when he decided he wanted me back. I thought his begging and showing up at my door was bad, but that was just the surface. When I wouldn't give him what he wanted, he started escalating. It began with flowers. Every week, bouquets would arrive at my apartment, roses, lilies, tulips. No note, but I knew exactly who sent them. At first, I threw them away immediately, but then I realized something. I didn't want to just erase them. I wanted to look at them as proof of his desperation. Proof that the man who once abandoned me when I was bald and weak was now the one groveling. I lined them up in vases until my kitchen looked like a florist shop. But it didn't take long before the sight of them started to make me sick. When the flowers didn't get the response he wanted, the letters came. Handwritten, long, messy letters filled with apologies and romantic declarations. He wrote about our love story, about fate bringing us back together, as if my cancer was just some minor inconvenience in his narrative. The arrogance of it made my blood boil. Then he went further. He started calling my workplace. My boss pulled me aside one day, clearly uncomfortable, and said, your ex-husband's been leaving messages, he says it's important. I wanted to die from embarrassment. My personal humiliation had become office gossip. People looked at me with pity, whispering about how my ex wanted me back. It was like being trapped in a circus where my pain was the main attraction. But the worst, the absolute worst, was when he started showing up in places he knew I would be. He appeared at the cafe near my apartment, at the pharmacy, even once at the hospital waiting room during one of my checkups. Each time, he would put on this act of being accidentally there, like fate kept throwing us together. I wasn't stupid, I knew he was stalking me. I finally confronted him one day outside the pharmacy. I remember gripping my bag so tightly my knuckles turned white. You need to stop this, I told him. You don't love me. You love the idea of me forgiving you so you don't have to live with what you did. He stared at me like a wounded child and said, "You're wrong. You're the only woman I've ever truly loved." And for a second, that old part of me, the part that still remembered the man I married, felt something stir. But then I looked at him closer. His eyes weren't soft. They were frantic. He wasn't in love with me, he was obsessed with redeeming himself. That realization should have set me free, but instead it made things darker. Because obsession is dangerous. Obsession doesn't end with a polite goodbye. Sure enough, a week later, he crossed a line I didn't think he would ever cross. I woke up one morning to a flood of messages on my phone. Friends, coworkers, even distant cousins had all sent me the same screenshot, a post Daniel had made on Facebook. In it, he shared an old photo of us, me with long hair, before chemo, captioned with a long rant about how I was the love of his life and how he was determined to win me back. He wrote about my illness, about my incredible strength, and how he regretted every mistake. He used my cancer as his redemption arc. My private battle, my scars, my tears, he put them on display for sympathy. And at work, comments poured in, everyone deserves a second chance. True love always finds a way. People were romanticizing my suffering, turning my abandonment into some twisted love story. I was shaking with rage. That was my story. My pain. He had no right to use it. No right to rewrite history and make himself the tragic hero. I called him, furious. When he answered, his voice was calm, almost smug. I just wanted people to know how much you mean to me, he said. No, I spat back. You wanted people to forget what you did. You wanted to make yourself look good by dragging me through the mud. That night, I cried harder than I had in months. Not because I missed him, God, no, but because I realized I was still trapped in his shadow. Even after surviving cancer, even after clawing my way back to life, he still had the power to humiliate me. But then something changed inside me. I stopped crying. I wiped my face and looked in the mirror at my short, uneven hair growing back, at the pale but determined woman staring at me. I wasn't his victim anymore. I wasn't going to let him keep controlling the narrative. And that's when I decided, if he wanted a war, I would give him one. I didn't survive chemotherapy just to be dragged through another battle I didn't choose. That night, after his Facebook stunt, I realized something: silence was no longer protecting me. He was using my silence to paint me as a character in his fantasy. If I didn't push back, the world would believe his version of our story, and I would once again be invisible in my own life. So I fought back. The very next day, I made a post of my own. It wasn't dramatic or poetic. It was raw. I uploaded a picture of myself from chemo, bald, pale, tubes taped to my arm, and I wrote, while I was fighting for my life, my husband left me for another woman. He told me I was too much to handle, that he couldn't watch me like this. He moved in with her while I was vomiting into a basin every night. Now that she's cheated on him, he wants to come back. I don't want him back. I want him to leave me alone. Cancer didn't kill me, and neither will his lies. I will not be rewritten as his redemption story. I didn't expect much. But within hours, it exploded. Hundreds of shares, dozens of comments, people I hadn't spoken to in years were sending me messages of support. Friends I thought had drifted away came rushing back, furious on my behalf. Even strangers left words like, "You're a warrior. Don't let him rewrite your pain." For the first time, Daniel was exposed. His heroic narrative crumbled. People started questioning him publicly. Wait, didn't you leave her during chemo? So now you're playing the victim? He went from being seen as some tragic man trying to win back his love to being recognized for what he was, a coward who had abandoned his wife when she needed him most. The backlash must have shocked him, because for a few days, he went silent. I thought maybe, finally, he'd realized he couldn't manipulate me anymore. But I should have known better. His ego wasn't built for humiliation. When he came back furious. One night, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. I pressed play, and his voice came through, low and venomous. "You think you're clever? You think humiliating me online makes you strong? You're nothing without me. No man is ever going to want a sick woman with scars. You should be grateful I even still want you." I nearly dropped my phone. My heart raced with both rage and terror. That was the real Daniel, not the tearful, begging one, but the man who had once looked at me with disgust when the chemo took my hair. He didn't want me back because he loved me. He wanted me back because he couldn't stand losing control. The messages got worse. Angry texts in the middle of the night. Thinly veiled threats. He wrote things like, "If I can't have you, no one will." I knew I had to protect myself. I went to the police with the voicemails and messages, and while they didn't arrest him, they issued a warning. It didn't stop him, but it gave me something important, a paper trail. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that he was harassing me. The stress was unbearable, but strangely, I also felt stronger than I had in years. Surviving cancer had stripped me bare, made me rebuild myself from scratch. This was just another test. I wasn't the weak, desperate woman he thought I'd be. But Daniel wasn't done. He tried to twist everything again, this time in private. He showed up at my sister's house while I was visiting, barging in without an invitation. My sister, still conflicted, let him speak. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you don't take me back, I'll tell everyone you've been sleeping around. I'll destroy what's left of your reputation." The irony almost made me laugh. A man who left his wife during chemo, threatening to shame me with lies? For a moment, the absurdity of it made me want to scream. But instead, I smiled. A cold, steady smile. "Go ahead," I told him. "Tell everyone whatever you want. But remember this, I have the truth, and the truth already destroyed you once. You think anyone will believe a word you say now?" He froze. He wasn't expecting resistance. Not from me. Not anymore. That was the moment the balance shifted. For the first time since my diagnosis, I wasn't the one being hunted. I was the one holding the knife by the handle. But even as I stood there, strong and defiant, a small part of me wondered, how far was he willing to go? Because men like Daniel don't just walk away quietly when they lose. And deep down, I knew the climax hadn't arrived yet. He was going to strike again. Harder. Dirtier. And I had to be ready. The weeks after that confrontation at my sister's house felt like a storm waiting to break. Daniel disappeared for a while. No flowers, no messages, no voicemails dripping with venom. At first, I thought maybe he'd finally realized he was fighting a losing battle. Maybe, at last, I'd reclaimed my peace. But I should have known better. Silence was never surrender with him, it was preparation. The storm hit one Thursday morning. I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. Dozens of missed calls, endless notifications, messages pouring in from every platform. I opened one at random, and my blood turned to ice. It was a screenshot from a private group chat, one I wasn't even a part of. In it, Daniel had shared something vile. He had taken old photos of me, personal, intimate photos I had trusted him with when we were married, and spread them online. Naked photos. Pictures I never thought would leave the privacy of our bedroom. He posted them with captions like, "This is who everyone calls a hero. Don't be fooled." He called me disgusting, pitiful, damaged. My stomach lurched. I wanted to vomit. I couldn't breathe. The walls of my apartment felt like they were closing in. It wasn't just humiliation. It was annihilation. He had weaponized my own body against me. Within hours, the whispers began. Coworkers avoided eye contact. Friends messaged awkward apologies. My boss asked me to take some personal time while things settled down. Settled down? My reputation, my dignity, my privacy, it was all in flames. I locked myself in my bathroom, staring at the mirror. My hair had just started growing back after chemo, short and uneven. My scars peeked through the thin straps of my shirt. I pressed my hands against the sink, shaking. How much more could I endure? Cancer had taken my body, and now Daniel was trying to take my soul. I cried until my eyes were swollen, until there was nothing left inside me but anger. And that's when something clicked. I had survived poison dripping into my veins, days of vomiting and shaking, nights praying I'd live to see the morning. If I could survive cancer, I could survive him. So I fought back harder. I went to the police again, this time with evidence of revenge porn. I hired a lawyer, something I never thought I'd do, but I needed a shield and a sword. My lawyer filed for a restraining order, pressed charges, and pushed to have every single one of those photos taken down. We moved fast, and for once, I felt like I wasn't alone in this war. But Daniel wasn't done. When the restraining order arrived at his door, he showed up outside my apartment anyway, screaming like a madman in the middle of the night. He yelled about betrayal, about how I had ruined his life, about how I owed him because he once loved me. His voice echoed down the street, waking neighbors, drawing people to their windows. It was terrifying, but also liberating. Because for the first time, the world saw him for who he really was. Not a tragic man chasing lost love. Not a hero seeking redemption. But a broken, dangerous man who couldn't handle his own shame. The police came and dragged him away that night, handcuffed, still shouting my name like some deranged chant. And I stood at the window, shaking but unbroken, watching the man who had abandoned me in my darkest hour finally be forced to face the darkness inside himself. But here's the truth, even as I watched him disappear into the flashing lights, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Because there is no real victory when the person you once loved turns into your enemy. There's only survival. And yet, even in that emptiness, a thought burned inside me. He tried to destroy me, but I was still here. Still breathing. Still standing. But part of me couldn't shake the fear. What if this wasn't the end? What if the man who once promised to protect me until death would keep haunting me until he made good on those words? The night Daniel was arrested, I thought the nightmare was finally over. I stood at the window of my apartment, watching the blue and red lights disappear into the distance, and for the first time in years, I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim my life without him lurking in the shadows. But as the adrenaline faded, reality set in. An arrest wasn't the end. It was just another battle in a war that seemed endless. I still had to face the fallout of everything he'd done. The revenge porn, the harassment, the whispers in my community. His fingerprints were all over my life, staining every corner of it. The trial came months later. I'll never forget the first day I walked into that courtroom. My legs shook so badly I thought I'd collapse before reaching the stand. There he was, sitting just feet away, dressed in a suit that didn't hide the bitterness etched into his face. He looked at me like I was the one who had betrayed him, like I had ruined his life instead of the other way around. When the prosecutor played the voicemails he'd left me, the courtroom went silent. His voice, dripping with venom, echoed through the speakers, "If I can't have you, no one will." I watched jurors shift uncomfortably in their seats. I saw his attorney bury his face in his notes. For the first time, I wasn't the one on trial, he was. But hearing it all laid out again, the texts, the photos, the betrayal, was like ripping open wounds that had barely started to scar. I felt naked, exposed, as if every humiliation I'd endured was being dissected under a microscope. My body trembled on the stand, but I forced myself to keep speaking, because if I didn't, his narrative would win again. The verdict came after weeks of testimony. Guilty on charges of harassment. Guilty on charges of distributing intimate images without consent. He wasn't sentenced to years in prison, it wasn't that kind of case, but he did get time behind bars, fines, and the label of a man who preyed on his wife when she was at her weakest. That label, I hoped, would follow him forever. And yet, even as the gavel struck, I didn't feel victorious. People imagine justice as this clean, cathartic moment, but the truth is messier. There is no undoing the damage. The photos he leaked can't be erased from people's memories. The nights I cried myself to sleep, shaking from both chemo and heartbreak, can't be rewritten. Justice doesn't heal, it only prevents further bleeding. After the trial, I tried to move forward. I cut my hair short and dyed it a color I'd never worn before. I got a small tattoo on my wrist, a symbol of survival. I started therapy, speaking words I had kept locked inside me for too long. Slowly, I learned how to live without flinching every time my phone buzzed. But healing is not linear. There are still nights when I wake up drenched in sweat, hearing his voice in my head, calling me worthless, reminding me of the photos he exposed. There are still days when I catch people staring too long at me in public, and I wonder, did they see them? Did they judge me? Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed, I replay everything from the beginning. The day he walked out while I was hooked to N4. The way he looked at me like I was already a ghost. The silence that followed when I needed him most. And then I think about the irony of it all, that he came crawling back only after the woman he left me for betrayed him. He thought I'd be desperate enough to forgive. But what he didn't understand is that cancer had already killed the part of me that would have begged him to stay. I am not the woman he left. I am not the victim he thought he could destroy. I am something he never expected, a survivor who doesn't need him. And yet, despite everything, a shadow lingers. Because when someone you once loved becomes your greatest enemy, the scars run deeper than the body. They live in your mind, your heart, your silence. I want to believe it's over. I want to believe I've finally closed the chapter on Daniel. But some nights, when the apartment is quiet and the world feels too heavy, I wonder if he's out there, still plotting, still bitter, still convinced I owe him something. And in those moments, I feel the fear crawl back under my skin. I tell myself I'm free. I tell myself I survived. But deep down, the truth echoes in my chest. I don't know if I'll ever really escape him. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. I don't know what to do.
Follow me for more stories.